Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video, and today I'm doing a review of Doctor Who The Mutants, a Jumper Twee episode. First of all, we'll go through the packaging. On the front we've got Jumper Twee with some of the mutts, Jumper Twee there as well, the Jumper Twee, years even, 1970 and 1974. Doctor Who, The Mutants, BBC, DVD. All of the other stuff on the front, 2-disc DVDs, or 2 discs, even PG, BBC, 2 Entertainment, Doctor Who, The Mutants, all that funky jazz on the spine. Special features, synopsis, even, and then the row of screenshots, 3 of which look very similar. And then the back disc, the front one, writer's notes, and or whatnot. So yeah, my thoughts on The Mutants. It was okay. I mean, the only other real sort of video that I've come across, excuse me, on YouTube about this story is Pertwee Smith, no, not Pertwee Smith 11, sorry, wrong person, TJ Productions video. He did a video a while ago of his, I think, top 10 most underrated classic Doctor Who episodes, and The Mutants was on there. So yeah, and I get what he's saying. I mean, it's got some good bits. It's not awful by any means, but it's not brilliant. I mean, it's got quite a lot of good ideas, but it's just that I don't feel like they all hit the mark, really, and that running, so to speak, which is a shame, really. The Mutants are decent. They reappear in Brain and Morbius, which is pretty cool, really. Probably first, and one of the few points in the classic series where it's got like an Easter egg to an old episode or something, and that, well, okay, but you know what I mean, like, in the 70s, i.e. before the 80s, where they very much redid a lot of old Who, or what was even, well, what would have been classed as old Who then anyway, which would have been 60s and 70s Who. But yeah, I think Doctor Who's always better when it's moving forward, and this story definitely does that. I think it's a bit too ambitious at times. And I think that's why it falls flat a bit for me. I really do like the idea and the concept of the Time Lords having this, like, spherical thing, data thing sent to the Doctor, and he can't open it, but he has to find out who can, though. But the TARDIS has, like, got coordinates being, like, pre-programmed into its system, so the TARDIS knows where to go, and that, whereas the Doctor doesn't. But yeah, it's interesting for the first sort of 3 parts. It's like the latter end. It's about around the halfway point. I personally kind of got bored, and that. And there's only like a handful of cliffhangers that I like maybe 2 or 3 at most that I liked. The rest were a bit generic. John Pertwee's phenomenal in this, though. Joe Grant has, or Katie Manning as Joe Grant gets a nice bit where she actually sort of has a decent chunk of a part to say something, you know, quite important. One thing I will say, though, before I forget to note this, the people who are at the end of this story are their costumes are very similar to that of Time Lords, and that, like, how the Time Lords look both in the classic and all new series, you know, with these, like, sort of golden caps on their heads and the robes, and even the guards they have look very similar to what would later be the guards in, say, Deadly Assassin and whatnot, so, which I thought was very interesting. I love John Pertwee's coat in this as well, by the way. I really do adore that coat. Wish I could have that coat. But yeah, it's a decent story. Again, the mutants are okay, and that, I just like the idea behind them more so, that the people of Solus, I think it was called, go through, like, three different evolutionary steps, or two really, which is their normal selves of sorts, then they're mutants, and then this sort of like almost ethereal light being type character, which I thought was pretty cool. And that, but I think the only thing that I didn't particularly care for with the mutant design was like there was this weird bit where like on the back of them they have like this weird like shell-like thing that like sort of protrudes out of their back where their backside should be, but it's really weird and really sort of awkwardly placed and wobbles about the place and that. And that, I mean, they're doing as well as they could do with the resources they have, limited resources they have. There is a certain bit of this which really kind of took me out of the story and just came out of nowhere. Well, actually, that happened twice, actually, which it's a bit of a rarity, but, well, sometimes anyway. But those 2 points would be the bit with the space person, or the person with a space suit even, in the caves. That really sort of threw me off when Joe Grant finally meets that person and or sees that person. And that really threw me off, but so did the bit where one of the characters on the space station ends up doing something and then the wall like breaks and then they're all like, oh my god, we're in a vacuum and all that, you know, like this person's just floating in space and it's awful. CSO, I think it is. The CG in this, it's just awful. Like, they rely on it quite a bit, and I don't mind them having it here and there, like in some Tom Baker stories, or even some Jon Pertwee stories. I don't mind it here and there, but if you use it a lot, then it starts really sort of becoming not a great story. I mean, from what I have heard, Underworld, a Tom Baker story called Underworld, very much heavily uses CSO, and it's really bad and really noticeable. I'd say The Invisible Enemy, again, is another story that's kind of falls flat for me, that has quite a bit of special effects, and that I think where Classic Who sort of shines is the practical effects, and even if they're not great, at least you can see that they're practical and see that they're trying to do something with the limited resources that they've got, and it looks, well, it either looks better usually, even if it's not great, or what I mean is that it's usually better for the actors to just act against, you know, and that, like, Jon Pertwee is notorious for not liking the Daleks because he didn't particularly care for the fact that he couldn't act alongside something, and that was humanoid, and also the fact that they were a pain to trundle out on location shoots and that, you know, so he preferred acting alongside actual things that he could act against. So, but yeah, I think this story is ambitious. It's got some decent ideas. The supporting cast's phenomenal. It's one of the first stories that I can think of, or will now come up into my head, that has a really good, strong supporting cast in the classic series, and that I liked a lot of the side characters, and the side characters were very interesting and a welcome addition to the story, and that I think it is very important sort of world building story, this one. It's just that the planet of Solus is so, you know, empty and sort of visually grey and dark and stingy, and that it is kind of like not gripping enough and visually entertaining enough to get emotionally invested in that. I think, you know, the main fat, horrible, leadery person who ends up of the security sort of division of this spaceship is phenomenal. He's great. He's psychotic as hell. The scientist guy is also great, and I'm sure he might be the same scientist who plays the scientist in Genesis. I'm sure the actor's played another part in Doctor Who. He was a very familiar actor. I can't put the name of his other role. Doesn't pop into mind, unfortunately. But yeah, he was great, the scientist guy, as was the leader, as was Jon Pertwee and Joe Grant, and that. It's just that, as I say, the story sort of fell flat. What I will say though is that props to the art department, because the globe thing that was always on the leader's desk looked really cool. And it was really cool because I noticed the sort of change of, like, you know, it sometimes being red and horrible, and then sometimes it being green. Like, the art department and sort of set designers need a lot of praise in this story, because, like, for example, there's a bit about one of the characters says, oh yeah, this is the ancient language of our people, and blah blah blah, and that you can usually see it all over the caves and that, and then in the background of the caves there are these ancient, like, sort of, you know, texts and or symbols on the walls and that, which I thought was great. It's these little additions and touches that really add another dimension and layer to this story. It's just I wish they used less CSO and, you know, maybe tightened the story a bit more, you know, chucked a few little bits out and refined some other bits. That's the thing. Like, I don't think this story had to be 6 parts long, personally. It's one of those rare Jon Pertwee stories as well that has him not on Earth and not with the unit family, which is a bit peculiar, but is a nice refreshing pace, I'll be honest. It's interesting to see him on a spaceship. It feels in that respect kind of Tom Baker-esque, but not quite to the sort of refinedness. You know, this is like a little template of, like, what would later be, you know, fully developed in Ark in Space, or the mutation-y aspect of, like, Genesis or whatever, you know. It's like Genesis about the mutation, but just about mutations and these people being mutated and that. And if that sounds interesting to you, then this is the story for you. But for me, I like the concept, it just didn't hit the mark a lot of the time, unfortunately. And I really wanted to like the story, but for me, I'd give the Mutants a 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching, comment, rate, and subscribe.